ability that a facility has for a particular species. So the rehabilitator needs to have the skills to recognize and treat the conditions that animals are being presented with. We need to have proper housing for the species, for the age of the animal, the condition throughout its rehab process. And we also need to have access to appropriate release sites if we cannot release the animal at the original site that it came from for one reason or another. Sanitation and biosecurity is essential for keeping our animals safe, keeping us safe, and making sure that we're not transmitting any diseases from one sick animal to another, especially with these highly communicable viruses that we've been seeing in more and more animals. And of course, we need to have veterinary support. We need to be able to network and mentor with other people, or mentor apprentice rehabilitators. And we also have to understand the gift of euthanasia, because that is a reality of what we do, and euthanasia truly is a gift. One of my earlier slides says we need to have a goal of releasing these animals back into the wild. The goal is not, keep it as an educational resident. The goal is to release it. And if we can't do that, not every animal has an appropriate temperament or an appropriate condition, permanent injury or whatever, to be able to have a stress-free and happy, healthy life in captivity. So we don't doom animals to that fate unless it's, very appropriate for that particular bird. So euthanasia is the last gift we can give if we are not able to save this animal or, provide it with high quality of life. And so, again, quality, not quantity. We're not trying to take in as many animals as, physically possible for our clinic. We do that sometimes when we have the resources and capacity to do that. But we need to make sure that we continue to provide quality care, and really focus on what our specialties are in order to provide the most beneficial service to these animals and to our community. And of course, it's not on there, but we need to have passion for wildlife, passion for birds, and conservation. That's important. So we get calls over the phone more often than not. Sometimes we get emails as well. But we need to get as much info as possible before we determine whether or not the animal truly needs help. Again, we don't want to take in an animal that doesn't need our help. We want to figure out the species, the age, information details about the behavior, the condition that the finder is observing. The finder is the person who have found the animal. And then we can make an educated conclusion about what the need of care based on all this information. So, we might, ideally we get photos. Those are great. That's iPhones and things like that. They're just an essential upgrade from the old school, describe what the bird looks like over the phone sort of routine that a lot of rehabbers remember. But, we get calls about animals that seem like they might need help, but actually don't, like, a healthy fledgling bird. We'll talk about fledglings again in a minute, but a young bird that's supposed to be on the ground for some species, or that has recently left the nest, or sometimes birds of prey that are sitting on food in the median of a highway that it just caught, and it looks like, its wings are drooped, it's, hanging over its food. It might look like it's injured, but it's actually just, trying to protect the food that it caught. Sometimes young raptors, young birds of prey are on the ground exploring before they're independent from the parents. So again, it takes some detective work to figure out exactly what the scenario is. So some of the telltale signs that something is not right, if there's this is sort of more specifically for birds, because that's what our specialty is at the Sharon Audubon. But if it's featherless and on the ground, if it's a naked little baby, that's a problem. If you're seeing obvious signs of injury, blood, other fluid, obvious broken bone or dangling limb. If its eyes are closed on the ground, or squinty or crusty or dull looking, that's usually a sign that something's not right. So lying on the stomach or side, all of those things. If it's adult bird, you never want to, you should never be able to pick up an adult bird or approach closely an adult bird. So that means there's something wrong. So there's a lot of different things that are subjective, but more often or not, if something's flopping around or rolling around or covered in flies or fly eggs, that's just, there's something wrong. So telltale signs that something needs to come in. So let me see, get my little pointer here. Here we go. So that's just a European starling that is an adult, and it's definitely, that's not normal positioning for an adult bird. And this is a barred owl on the side of the road. Sometimes they land on the side of the road, but its eyes are closed. It's sort of laying down flat. Its head's turned behind it. It's just not looking too hot. So nestling versus fledgling. These are two different species. This is a common grackle and this is an American robin. But the nestlings are baby birds, usually that are usually naked or have pin feathers just sort of coming in, that are still in the nest. But nestling means still in the nest. And again, different species have longer, different length nesting stages. But fledglings are birds that have just left the nest. So for a lot of species of songbirds and small birds, they often fledge or leave the nest before they're able to fly. They have these short little wings, they have short little tail feathers. They are, able to support themselves upright, and they can hop around or flutter a little bit, but they can't sustain flight. But they're covered with feathers as opposed to the little naked nestlings. So again, this is not always the case, because one size does not fit all with birds. So that's why the infographics that a lot of times you see online, like find a baby bird, now what? That works great for, well, better for squirrels and rabbits and things that we're just talking about one specific species. But songbirds, there's so many different types. So again, just having a general idea of what those main reasons that, those telltale signs, I should say, again. So, this is a nestling grackle. Its eyes are closed, it's naked, it can't support itself upright, its legs are out to the side. That's a little baby that should not be out of the nest. But this is a fledgling American robin, and its eyes are nice and bright. Again, it's able to support itself, look upright, sit upright and everything. And this bird happened to be, also confirmed to be in good condition otherwise. And so that's a baby that didn't actually need help. So, a little pop quiz, you don't have to, answer out loud or anything, but, compare the pictures. Which one looks healthy and which one does not? So this is a fledgling eastern bluebird on the left here. It's actually a little bit older than a fledgling, it's immature, but this is a fledgling chipping sparrow over here. And again, what indicates concern? Those bright, beautiful eyes, or, these crusty kind of closed ones. There's stuff on its beak. It's all fluffed up and curled up. It's actually, its feet are curled under here. Wings are drooped. So those are things that we walk through and try to figure out what's going on. Again, so these are fledgling American robins. This guy, not looking too good over here. There's blood on the beak, dried blood, fluff feathers. And then these ones are just bright and beautiful. So when we get pictures from people, it's super helpful. And then identifying nestlings when they come in. There's different types of nestlings. There's altricial, precocial, and semi-precocial. So the altricial nestlings are most of the songbirds. And when I say songbirds, I'm not just talking about just like the technical songbirds, small birds, because woodpeckers and swallows and chimney swifts, they're not all technically songbirds, but just to make it a little bit, they're not all technically passerines either. But I just generalize here the songbirds, the small birds versus the waterfowl, ducks and geese and things. And then our raptors. These are little eastern screech owls. And this is a little common merganser, and this is a chimney swift. So the altricials are born naked, their eyes are closed, they can't really move around, they can't make their own body heat, parents feed them. The precocial are ones that are born fluffy, hatch out of the egg with down feathers. They're mobile, they can make their own body heat a little bit, but at least not long after birth or after hatch, excuse me. They can self-feed, right away or pretty close to it. Those are the waterfowl. And then the semi-precocial, so they're born with down feathers, but they're a little bit more like these guys where they need help with thermoregulation and their eyes are closed and their parents still need to care for them. So we don't always know what it is right away, but you know what it's not, right? So this is a slide that I use for training lectures is, start with what it's not first and just narrow it down. So this is a nestling black crowned night heron that we got in a few years ago. We know it's not any of these guys. So, we want to first, use our guides and just use our skills for observation and look at all of these different parts of the body to be able to start identifying our bird, because the entire rehab process is dependent on the species. So, we're looking at the color, pattern, texture of the feather tracts of the plumage. The legs and feet, we're looking at length, shape of the tail, of the legs and the feet, the color, position of the toes, beak, again, length, color, shape, the same thing for wings and tails in the body. You can also identify it by vocalizations and behavior too. And this is just a nice slide with just a random variety of different animals that or different birds that we can get in a given summer season. So we have quite a variety of species that we take in. So we always re-nest and reunite when possible. So if we have a healthy baby or a baby that's deemed healthy, maybe it was kidnapped or maybe it fell from the nest, but it's able to go back in, we want to get the baby back into its original nest or a foster nest if possible, as soon as possible. We can usually re-nest or reunite babies with their parents within a period of 48 hours tops, but the sooner the better. But sometimes we're able to create a makeshift nest to put back in the spot where the original nest location was if that nest was destroyed. Or we can find another species, or another family that has other babies around the same age that does not have a full clutch, that we can pop one of the rehab baby in to be raised by that other family. So again, we have to know our species, so we know exactly what kind of nest to make to be able to reunite healthy babies with parents. And we have to continue to observe after we do that. It's not always successful, but we do our best. So this was a nest or a cavity in a log that we re-nested some red-bellied woodpeckers in. We just strapped this chunk to a tree. This is re-nesting chimney swifts. This is an American crow. These are barn swallows. And this, I'm not sure exactly what this was. This is from Wildlife Center of Texas. So this is I think one of the only pictures that wasn't mine. But there's all different ways that you can do that. This is a robin. This one, actually, no, it was this little one. That's right. So this little one, we wild fostered in with a wild group at one of our bird of prey aviaries. So we had this one little guy who's actually a little bit younger than these other four, but robins can have 5 or 6 babies sometimes. So we and there's this one robin returns to this nest every year. So we did successfully wild foster this baby. We popped a little baby in with the wild guys, and we watched them be raised, and we watched them fledge, and it was a happy ending. So we don't want to keep birds or animals in the clinic unless we absolutely have to. Birds are best raised by birds. And so we try to prevent as many animals from coming in as possible in that respect. So when we get our animal in, we do physical examinations. We start with observation. We physically examine the bird. Once the bird's stabilized, we start from the top and work our way down. And we go through every single part of the animal. And again, knowing your species, it helps because different parts, different wings, different, bone shapes and muscle appearances for birds are different for different species. And normal versus abnormal. You want to look, you want to know what normal looks and feels like. And so that way we can recognize that something's wrong. Symmetry is key. This was a robin that actually had wing feathers ripped out on purpose. Great horned owl, you can see those pupils are, asymmetrically dilated. They can actually do that on purpose, but he has a pretty severe head tilt as well. So this one is a head trauma patient. This is a little, actually, this was a house sparrow from years ago that was caught by a cat and had ruptured air sacs. So that's air under the skin from those punctures. The yellow-bellied sapsucker, you can see here that half the feathers on top of the head are erect and the other half are flat. That's a fairly common symptom of head trauma. And then, let's see here. This is a little robin fledgling that's trying to preen, but she's wiggly and very unstable. And we're pretty certain that this was a pesticide thing. That sort of instability is fairly common with pesticide toxicities. So behavior and body language is another part of our physical exam. Observation. You can tell, the physical and mental state of the bird a lot by its behavior and by its body language, its position. We can identify, feelings of calm or head trauma, sedation, sort of fear, aggression, sickness, injury by the body language. So we're looking at the posture, the position of the head and the limbs, position of the feathers, any vocalizations. So this red tail here is pretty seriously freaked out. You can tell by, its wing posture up there. It's leaned back. His mouth is open, tongue's out, very stressed. This gray horned owl is very unhappy with us as well. This youngster, lifting, that's a defensive behavior as well, lifting those wings and sticking that head down. This barred owl, you can see that there's something going on, probably some head trauma. There's a little bit of a tilt. It's very lethargic. Its eyes closed. It wasn't very responsive. And this is a little downy woodpecker over here who is on its side. Its wings are kind of cocked in the back, just on its side. Its legs are limp. So it's not moving at all. So that probably indicates some sort of injury, either maybe with the legs, pelvis, or even head trauma. So using all of those things that you're observing can help tell you how to go about your exam. If I'm seeing that this bird can't stand, I'm going to be pretty gentle, restraining it in that pelvic or spinal area. So initial stabilization. Quiet, heat, and fluids. Allowing the bird to decompress in a dark, quiet, warm place after transport will decrease stress and decrease the likelihood of stress-induced conditions. So stress is a physical condition, and stress hormones released in the body can kill the bird. So we want to make sure that we remember that these animals are not pets. They don't know we're trying to help them. We're predators, and the more we talk and touch them, and the higher the stress is going to be. And we want to minimize stress to promote healing. We provide heat for babies that need supplemental heat, or for adult birds that are hypothermic, so their just body temperatures are dangerously low. We also will rehydrate before treatments unless there's a critical emergency. So fluid therapy is a very important part of our stabilization. And so that doesn't mean, we don't give them water or anything. We have a special electrolyte fluid that we administer in certain ways, depending on what the bird's condition is. So those are the first things. And that's one of the reasons we advise people not to just feed a bird before they bring it into us, or feed any animal before they bring it to a rehabilitator, because sometimes dehydration and whatever the trauma is, all that can it needs to be addressed first before we introduce food. The same thing, like if a person heaven forbid gets hit by a car, we're not going to just offer them food right away. We have to deal with some other stuff first, stabilize them, and then the food comes away later. And this is just a picture that is just ancient picture, but I love it so much. We want to decrease stress. We have here our visual barriers that we'll put up in front of some of our wall cages to keep recovering patients calm and quiet. And this is one of our volunteers in a barred owl mask. So we had a nestling barred owl at one point. We get them fairly frequently, but and so we want to prevent imprinting. We want to prevent habituation. We want to keep these babies that we raise wild. And so, the baby's not going to see this and think it's an owl. But that was the decorations more for us. But it does help sort of keep the association of, the human's face for interaction, for, social interaction, things like that at a minimum for some of these birds at certain ages where they're very impressionable. And, giving fluids can be as simple as just popping it in their mouth. These are little Carolina wrens that we're just giving fluids in the way, that they naturally will open their mouth and gape for food. And then sometimes we will have adult birds that will nice and easily take fluids for us as well. This doesn't always happen, but it's nice when it does. Again, sometimes very often we have to assist feed the fluids. We have to tube feed animals. We have to give fluid injections if the patient's too debilitated or scared to take it on their own. This video for some reason wasn't playing, but it's the same thing. So we treat the injuries that come to us, of course, after the stabilization. So, how long do birds stay with us in the clinic? They can stay with us for a day. They can stay with us for months. Some bird have stayed with us for well over a year with special permission from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. To give the bird more than just the standard 6-month limit of care that legally, restrict how long we're able to keep birds in the clinic. But the average amount of time for babies to stay in the clinic is, a couple of weeks to even a little over a month, depending on how old the baby is when it comes in. So we want to make sure again that the animal is fully recovered from anything that it went through, and that it's fully independent and able to do all the normal things it's supposed to do. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So after initial stabilization and fluid therapy, again, let me just go back. I realized I didn't explain. This is an American robin fledgling that has a splint on its leg. Injured, a leg fracture. And this was a bald eagle that, this bird has so much wrong with it. It had some sort of horrible toxicity. The blood work, nothing showed up exactly what it was. Anyway, long story, very, very short. It had paralysis of its entire body except for its head, very neurological. We eventually got the wings moving. We eventually got the legs moving, but we built this little sling for her, so we could relieve pressure from her legs. And we did physical therapy on the legs, on the bottom of her feet with vibrations to stimulate those nerve endings. She came so far. We had her for months and she was doing very, very well. And unfortunately, it was not successful, but we were so proud of how far she came. Anyway, so she showed enough promise to keep going with our treatments for quite some time. And here we have a horned grebe, non-breeding plumage, an American woodcock. But anyway, we provide the treatments they need, whether it be anti-inflammatories or pain medications, antibiotics, physical therapy, wound management. Often, these treatments are several times a day. And then just another, we get fishing line entanglements quite a bit too. Again, we take in animals from all over the state. So this is a red-shouldered hawk that came in with some fishing line tangled around. Thankfully, it wasn't too bad. Though we've had some that are I try not to make my presentations too graphic, so I picked some of the lighter ones. And then housing. So we want our housing to be species appropriate, age appropriate. Again, the different life stages of every species is going to be different too. And we have to have our housing at each point during the rehabilitation process condition appropriate. And so, there's different types of activity levels that I think I have on the next slide that are appropriate for different conditions. But ultimately, we want it to the housing to be safe and not prevent further injury. We don't want them to get tangled up in anything that we have in there. We don't want anything sharp or, have them swallow anything weird or anything like that. We want to make sure that it protects their body, protects their feathers. For songbirds, it's critical that we have mesh screen on the inside of all of our cages to protect those feathers, because those feathers need to be perfect in order for them to be able to survive out in the wild. We don't want them to be able to escape from the housing, of course, and we don't want anything to get in. So all of our housing is predator proof, whether it be, in our clinic or outside. We want to make sure that all of these things apply to our housing. And, after, during pre-release or when it's an outdoor enclosure, we want to make sure that we're, it has natural light. It has a natural appearance for the bird. But more than anything, it needs to encourage and facilitate the natural behaviors, whether it be self-feeding or foraging or swimming or whatever. But again, we have to make sure that we are providing the right type of housing at the right stage. I'm not going to take these tiny little, what are these, little phoebes, hatchling phoebes, and put them right out here, in a pre-release enclosure. So, we have restricted activity, which is like a nest or a tiny small container that we might put a small songbird in with a broken leg or a wing injury to minimize the amount of movement that it has to protect that injury. And then there's limited activity. They're able to hop around. These guys should be outside already, but I think we were just tight on space because unfortunately we don't have an unlimited enclosure space. We only have a few outdoor enclosures. But it's limited activity. These guys are able to flutter and hop around and stuff and move. But they're waiting to go out for this unlimited activity where they can have free flight. And this is where they build up their muscles for flight and for their pre-release conditioning. They're exposed to the weather and the temperature fluctuations and things like that. And so they acclimate to the outdoors, getting ready for pre-release. Oh, and I just love this video. Little yellow-throated vireo fledgling. We had it since it was a hatchling, and so it was then old enough to start hopping out of the nest and start branching. So we want to make sure that we provide that process, that those next steps for the birds when they start getting old enough to perch on the side. We want a little branch up there so they can hop out of the nest like they would naturally. And of course, we want to make sure that, again, these birds are developing as naturally as possible in our very unnatural clinic environment. We want to make sure that birds are raised with others of their species, if possible, or at least with conspecifics or similar species that can cohabitate safely. Not all species get along. So, we can put let's see, we can put like robins and blue jays in together, but we're not going to put a blue jay in with a yellow-throated vireo, for example. So, similar species, so they can learn how to communicate with others, learn how to be in a social group if it's a social species, things like that. So here, we always quarantine patients for, at least, well, as long as we need to, depending on what's going on, before introducing them to a group. So even though this bird is next to it, this is the quarantine that this bird needs right now to make sure that there's nothing going over here. Usually our quarantining is just a little bit further apart, but we're introducing. This is a common grackles, and this one's a little bit younger than these guys, so I didn't want to put him right in because he was just going to get sat right on, but at least he's near others. And this is a little common merganser. He was a single, so we have a mirror in there with him until we were able to find him a friend. And diet composition. Again, knowing your species is everything. One size does not fit all. You know, we do 100% live insects, mostly mealworms and crickets and things for the majority of our small birds and songbirds that we admit. You know, but I'm not going, you know, we do take in birds of prey usually, so we will feed meat to our raptors. So, you know, it depends on the species and its natural history, the metabolic requirements and natural behaviors that the species has. The food we offer, we try to, you know, offer a variety to everything that we get in eventually. But, you know, if we're conditioning a bird to search for, to forage and look and recognize natural foods, we need to make sure that we provide natural food variations as much as possible. You know, if we are, you know, that's different for the geographical region that you're in, and you know, the season too. So I mean, if we're like this cardinal here in the winter time, you know, we're going to try to, you know, provide a lot more like fruits and berries and you know, seeds and things like that, you know, that it's going to find in the fall, in the winter, to make sure that it's able to get that stuff off the ground before we release it or out of its environment. You know, the food might also depend on the condition of the patient, its illness, its injury, what its deficiencies are. This is a cedar waxwing. You can't tell, but it's a cedar waxwing that we got from, unfortunately, from another rehabilitator who raised it on a diet that wasn't appropriate for its species. So you can see that, you know, diet is very important. This is very nutrient deficient. There's the structural integrity of these feathers are very poor. And you might not be able to tell here, but there's really thick yellow fat layer underneath the skin. So it's a very obese bird. This bird had to stay with us for a year and a half before I molted out all its feathers before we could release it. So thankfully it was able to be released, but you know, proper nutrition can prevent a whole lot of developmental issues and you know, organ damage and various other things that can, you know, cause death further pretty quickly. So again, we do mostly 100% insect diets for our songbirds, and our songbird hand feeding schedule is a lot. So we feed our songbirds a minimum of 14 hours a day. Sometimes, you know, with some species, when they're a little bit older, we'll do, you know, 12 hours a day, or I'll take birds home with me. And so I'm feeding them for 18 hours a day. But we have a lot of volunteers in the summertime to help keep up with the hand feeding for these birds. So little hatchlings require feeding like every 15 or 20 minutes. And then the older they get, we can increase that feeding increment a little bit more until they are able to self-feed, unless they are chimney swifts that never self-feed in captivity. So this is our life in the summertime. This is our rehab intern from this last 2 years, Mackenzie. Again, we hand feed these guys. They'll never self-feed in captivity. And if there are no digestive issues with these swifts, we feed them as much as they want because their metabolisms are so high. And we'll talk about that in a second. We're going to just delve into some chimney swift stuff for a minute. But, you know, we had like 80 swifts here in this video. And so feeding takes about an hour and a half. And we're supposed to feed them every hour. So we just do our best. So chimney swifts, you know, we're the primary swift rehabilitation facility in our region. Some other rehabbers, and you know, I think another one in Southern Connecticut and one or two in kind of our New York State area will take smaller numbers. But we take swifts in from across the state. We get them down from Massachusetts. We get swifts sent up from to our facility from rehab centers in Manhattan and another one in Long Island. And swifts are an incredible species of aerial insectivore, meaning they eat live flying insects on the wing or in flight. And they don't stand upright like most birds do. They cling to vertical surfaces, and they get their name Chimney Swifts because of their nesting and roosting in chimneys, in the colonial style chimneys that replaced their original hollow tree nesting and roosting sites, because most of those hollow trees that used to be everywhere in the old growth forest are now pretty obsolete. And so they leave the chimney at dawn. They fly the entire day without landing, catching insects on the wing or in flight. And then they return to the chimney at dusk. And they're in our area mid to late April, and they're here until the end of fall, like, August or September. And then they migrate down to the Amazon River Basin. And they are a nationally declining species. And they've had a estimated 30% population loss since the 1970s due to the loss of breeding habitats, chimneys and hollow trees, pesticides and climate change affecting their insect food resources. And they are now officially one of National Audubon Society's conservation priority species. And there are conservation priority species as well at our center. And so you can see these little forward-facing toes that cling, and they even have these little spines. There's these feather shafts that don't have any of the soft feather vein on either side that push against the vertical surface they cling to put a little space between their abdomen and the walls to protect their feathers. But they're just absolutely incredible birds. And their nests are made of tiny little sticks that they break off of branches while they're flying. And they glue them together with their saliva that hardens. And the nest is just cemented. And there's another like round part that goes up here, cemented to the inside of chimneys. And they nest in like the bottom third of chimneys or so. And sometimes if the nest is not structurally sound, for one reason or another, the nest breaks apart or pops off the wall. And so the saliva can often soften in the high heat and humidity of summer. And that's where we get a lot of our babies from. Over the last several years, we've gotten our first fallen chimney swift babies on the 4th of July. And the bulk of our swift admissions happen during that mid-July humidity and heat. So all of these things just kind of break apart and then the babies fall down. So this is just a basic chimney design here. And this is usually where the swifts will nest. And if the nest falls down here, a lot of times the babies will end up on this side of the damper. Sometimes if they're here, they can crawl back up. But if they fall past this horizontal area, again, past that horizontal area, the parent cannot access them. So this is a swift that was, how someone found it in their fireplace this summer. You can see the fallen nest here and an older swift. So sometimes the swifts fall when they're older, when they're already clinging to the inside of the chimney, when it just gets so stinking hot in there, not a lot of airflow, and they just get weak and fall down. So we take swifts at all stages, even as young as these little nuggets. So these are hatchlings, and you can tell, based on those telltale signs, so 3 of these are very active and one's not doing quite as hot. So, we need to make sure that we are providing heat, providing, intense humidity monitoring, because they can dry out. But we want to, we can re-nest babies at this age, and we have to evaluate each swift baby that falls before it comes in, usually, to see if it's a candidate of renesting, because these swifts come to us from hours away. So we can't have them bring them over and then say, oh, no, you can put them back, and send people 3 hours back home with these babies. So we take hundreds of, it feels like hundreds, I shouldn't say that. We take a lot of calls about, all the birds that people find. But with swifts, we need to make sure that we are as thorough as possible with our evaluations. And, if the babies are in good condition, they can be re-nested. This is a sketch from the Wildlife Center of Virginia that has some examples of how to re-nest, contraptions you can make to re-nest swifts. You can put nests in little baskets. They need to go over the flue, but they need to have the wall of their basket pressed right up against the wall of the chimney so they can eventually crawl out. You can put the nest on a stick, or you can go in from the top. So we've had people, a few people this summer re-nest swifts by through the top of their chimney, which is usually, the last resort. But we have to figure out the general design of the chimney over the phone and try to work with the finder to see if these guys are going to be able to be re-nested. We prevented over 50 swifts nestlings from having to come into rehab this past summer by re-nesting over the phone, which is great because we took in over 100 swifts this summer. So we prevented another 50 from coming through, and keep it, to keep these swifts with their parents, to get raised by their parents like they should. So this is great. So this is if you're interested in the full story, we have this on our Facebook and Instagram page, but this is a very unique sort of chimney situation that was in a business in Bristol this summer. And they heard peeping. They said, "That sounds like there are pterodactyls in my fireplace." I'm like, "Those are chimney swifts." So anyway, this was an a vent pipe that wasn't being used by an actual stove right now. So there was a little clean out port down here. So this is where they found the swifts, but they were able. We walked them through. They're able to make this little platform inside. They made this little, it's almost like a little pizza thing, we put the nest right in here, and just like we're putting a brick oven pizza, we slid the swifts right in, so the edge of the nest was right up against the wall, and then we blocked up in the front anyway. And so a lot of times we're able to determine success of re-nesting by checking on the babies to see if their condition has deteriorated at all, make sure they're still warm and healthy. Sometimes we can listen and hear the babies chirping every once in a while, and we know that that's the parents coming down to feed them. Sometimes we hear the fluttering of the parents' wings, but we don't always see it because of just the way chimneys are. But this unique chimney gave the finder the opportunity to put a camera. Whoopsies, no. Let's see if I can go back to put a camera up. Here it is. See mom coming down to feed. Gets me every time. It's so wonderful, it's so beautiful, and it's because of the passion and the excitement of the finders after learning about swifts, and they're willing to do this. So we have quite good success with people willing to re-nest chimney swifts. So when they are in outdoor enclosure, we condition them to fly to a makeshift chimney in order to be fed, because remember, we have to hand feed these guys every hour for a long time. And if they're clinging all over the place, that would be very, very difficult. So we condition them to do the opposite of what they would do in the wild. In the wild at dawn, they leave the nest. Oh, sorry if that video is getting a little choppy. They leave their chimney and they fly all day to eat and then come back to roost. But here we condition them to fly back to the chimney to eat, and then they can fly out normally through the rest of the time. We could release live insects there with them, but they eat hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of insects a day, and we would just not be able to sustain that by catching live insects. So, this gets them to practice and learn how to fly and kind of flutter down into a chimney, so they'll be able to do that when we release them into the wild. So this is our makeshift chimney here. So again, we mostly rehab birds, but what other animals do we rehabilitate? These are my personal specialties, the North American porcupine. We take them from our corner of the state and also from like the north central part of the state too. That's where they are in Connecticut. And we orphaned babies. A lot of times parents are hit by cars, or the injured adults that are hit by cars or attacked by a wild animal, or dogs sometimes. A lot of times they fall out of trees, even though that's where they normally live and eat. So they're very heavy bodied. This is a baby that we raised this past summer, and this is one from who's self-medicating here. But we we do specialize in porcupine rehabilitation as well. So if you ever end up with any questions or anything, definitely feel free to reach out. And we'll take in a lot of turtles too. So, this has all the turtles we take in except for wood turtles. We do take in wood turtles, but I just don't have a picture of them up here. But we have snapping turtles, musk, eastern box, eastern painted, spotted, and again, wood turtles. So a lot of these are hit by cars. Sometimes they are caught by dogs. That's what the spotted turtle was, caught by a dog. We have them come in from like weed whacker casualties. Most of them are hit by cars when they're crossing to get to the bodies of water or crossing to lay their eggs. And snakes, we get snakes in for, again, weed whacker casualties, hit by cars, cat attacks a lot, and frogs and toads and salamanders, same sort of thing. So we will definitely take all of these guys as well. And we'll take in the occasional mammal. We used to take in a lot more mammals, but then we decided to focus most of our efforts on native birds. But we will often take smaller mammals, at least to stabilize and transfer to another rehabilitator if they're very local to us and they're not able to reach anyone right away. So opossums, rabbits, chipmunks, eastern gray squirrels, red squirrels, flying squirrels, woodchucks. We also take in mice and moles and voles as well, if needed. But we are not licensed for rabies vector species, which are fox and skunk and raccoon. We refer those to people who in rehabbers in the state who do have those special licenses, and the same for white-tailed deer. And we used to rehab bats, but since COVID came out, there are only a few rehabilitators in the state who are authorized to now take bats, because bats can get COVID from us as well. So we refer those to those species specialists. So release criteria and evaluation. Again, we want to release healthy and reproductively viable individuals back in the wild. That means we need to make sure that they meet the proper criteria. They need to be the appropriate age to be independent. They need to identify and obtain natural food sources, whatever that might be for the species. They should be maintaining a healthy weight, self-feeding out in the pre-release enclosure. They need to have them be successfully mobile and physically fit for their ambulation. So flight, swimming, running, if it's a certain bird that spends a lot of time on the ground like that. They need to be able to make migration if they are a species that migrates. And again, their feathers have to be in excellent condition and waterproof. So waterproof feathers have those drops of water that bead up on the feathers instead of soaking through. And again, they become waterproof by being acclimated to outdoor natural weather conditions. And of course, fully recover from any illness and injury. Have natural aversion to humans and domestic animals, and again, be reproductively viable. So that means that they can identify others of their species. They know how to interact properly socially, that they can communicate. They need to have the proper plumage. So if their feathers are very dull, if it's a non-breeding male, if it's a breeding male, they need to have that good condition breeding plumage if it's a species that has that. And if it's a female that will be laying eggs, did it have a pelvic injury? Are there pelvic fractures that have healed that are going to prevent being able to pass these eggs? We've got to think about everything like that. And again, these depend on our knowledge and skills of the different species. And so that's why rehabilitators often focus on, specialty species to make sure that we really know our stuff for the animals that we're working with. So for our release, we want to make sure that we get them back to the area that they came from if possible, or have another species appropriate location. That's a Chimney Swift, beautiful, that we released into a migrating flock, which is the protocol for that species. And we want to make sure that the area is safe, that we're not releasing it, right into the talons of another predator. If there's, want to make sure there's nothing at least that we see hanging in the trees. Appropriate time of day and season for the species, good clear weather, no extreme temperatures. And it's in a habitat that naturally supports populations of that animal, if it's not going back to its original location. I just love this video. Bunch of swallows getting released at our pond at our center, and they have tons of swallows. We have tons of swallows that are flying around out there all the time. So just to finish up here, why do we do this? Of course we love animals, but there's more than just that. Our wildlife rehabilitation work is a unique program within Audubon. We're one of only 2 Audubon centers that has rehabilitation program at their facility. And our wildlife rehabilitation work is directly aligned with Audubon's strategic priority for bird-friendly communities. And that is to protect bird populations in America's cities and towns by providing food, shelter, safe passage, and places for birds to raise their young. Communities meet those needs through individual and collective actions that also contribute to more sustainable human societies. So our Wildlife Rehab Clinic is a gateway to connect people in our communities to Audubon's mission to protect birds in the places they need. And we do that one bird at a time. With every bird, there's a connection. Saving individual birds that are negatively impacted by humans is a direct conservation action. And that forges connections between people and birds and fuels the desire to do more. Every person who brings us a bird becomes a resource in the community on what to do to help birds. And every time we interact with someone who calls or brings us an animal, it's an education opportunity. And if people care enough to bring us this animal, they care enough to listen, and they often they want to do more. Meanwhile, our clinic is run by volunteers, many or most of who have started volunteering after bringing us a hurt bird. And we actively work with teen interns and rehabilitation apprentices, to train new rehabilitators of all different generations from every walk of life. Finding a bird, it's not limited to one type of person in one location. We get birds from everybody. And that's one of the things that makes our program so special, so unique, and so effective. Our populations are made up of individuals, and our rehabilitation work makes a difference to individuals of both human and bird populations. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today to learn a little bit more about our rehabilitation work here at the Sharon Audubon Center. And if you're interested in learning more about what we do or seeing patient profiles, updates, and things like that, you can visit us on our Facebook page and also our Instagram page. An Instagram page is almost solely for our rehab clinic. So definitely feel free to email or anything or reach out. I'm going to stop screen sharing for a moment and see if anyone has any questions. I'd be happy to answer them. I know we're a little over time here, but I'm also fairly proud of myself for not going dramatically over time, because as you can imagine, I can talk about this stuff forever. But there are quite a few things in the chat. Oh, hi, Dennis. How are you?
Hi. Sorry I am late. I had COVID booster and I'm a little loopy, so I missed the start. But thanks for doing this. And there are a bunch of questions in the chat.
Yeah, I can just go through right now and answer some of those. And I hope you feel better. I remember a very similar experience with the COVID booster. It took me right out for about a day. Okay, so this one's from Josh. In addition to volunteers, how many full-time staff are there? Are most staff full-time? Do people work other jobs as well? And how long would training to work in this area be, and what kind of qualifications are needed? So to save time, I took out all those slides because that's a whole nother thing. So perfect. Thank you for asking. So we have 5 full-time staff people at the Sharon Audubon Center, but I am the only clinic and animal care staff person. We have a seasonal intern for like 3 months over the summer, who's full-time, but everything else in animal care is volunteer except for me. I'm full-time. And, we could use 10 more full-time rehab and animal care people. Of course, every center could. But how long would training to work in this area be? That's very subjective. There are now more resources for more formal training in rehabilitation field than there ever has been ever before. I went to a college that had a Bachelor's of Science degree in wildlife rehabilitation, which they made up, but it's a degree now, and we had a clinic on site. So there's options like that, but most of the rehabilitators in this field apprentice under other rehabilitators, and it's just experience. People volunteer, they intern, they do this forever. And if you're going to get a job in this field, like a paying job, you kind of go where the job is, because there's very few rehabilitation centers in general compared to, zoos and other types of places. And, everybody's, volunteer, and, everyone's nonprofit. So it's just experience more than anything else. There are some facilities who now require having, a vet tech license in the state for certain rehab positions, but those are usually the major facilities that take in 10 or 20,000 animals a year. So experience, and just the more you can do with your personal permit or volunteering under someone else's permits at a facility is going to be best. So every state's different. But in Connecticut, you need to have your state license through, or a wildlife appointment through DEEP to rehabilitate mammals. And that also includes reptiles and amphibians and non-migratory birds. And then if you want to rehabilitate, again, some of those other special species that I mentioned before, you need to have certain licenses, additional DEP licenses for that. And then if you want to rehabilitate migratory birds, like a lot of our songbirds and birds of prey and waterfowl, you need to have a license through U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And in those licenses, you are able to obtain after a certain amount of time interning and working under other rehabilitators. So it's all about experience. I hope that answered your question. It was a fairly long-winded answer. And again, the process for training for volunteering or part-time work. So we and other rehabilitation centers, we survive off volunteers. So if anyone's interested in volunteering, we train people who are interested in volunteering with us. We train as we go. Sometimes we have training workshops for our volunteers, new people, and our veteran volunteers. So if anybody's interested in volunteering, you go on our website and email our volunteer coordinator for all that information. But we train everybody who comes here. And is there a sampling of released birds? Or is there a sampling of released birds monitored or tagged in some way to have data to see how they survive upon release? So that's the only thing we ever want to do. But unfortunately, there are federal restrictions on who can tag things and why. And there were federal restrictions through U.S. Fish and Wildlife put on tagging or put on banding and tagging rehabilitated birds. So right now we are in the process of putting together a project to band and nanotag our chimney swifts that we release because they are a priority conservation species. And so that way we can, when we release them, we'll be able to get some information on, how they're surviving in the migrating flock before they actually leave to go down to the Amazon River. And so these nanotags will ping the different MODIS towers that hopefully that they would be flying by down their flyway to get down to their migration site in the wintertime. So we are hoping to do that. But unfortunately, there are a lot of restrictions for rehabilitated birds, and I don't know why, but that's the data that we need. That's the data that we need, and it's the hardest data to get permission wise. But we are planning to try to do that with our chimney swifts. If not this summer, then hopefully next summer, and so excited about that. We do train individuals to be rehab volunteers. So if you're interested in doing rehab with us at our center, the busiest times where you're going to get, you know, the most out of it is in the summer, but we do have year-round rehab volunteers that we depend on so heavily for all of the birds that we get in the winter as well. I went to Lees McRae College in North Carolina and they have their wildlife rehabilitation program there as well. That's the first school that had a rehabilitation clinic and program that was not associated with a veterinary school. So it's amazing. Can we partner with Cornell Lab of Ornithology to do more tagging? Yep. So we're in the process of all of that. So I'm not going to talk about it too much because it's still in the preliminary stages. But to give an idea, you know, we've taken swifts in for, you know, since the beginning of forever. But when I started here 8 years ago or so now, you know, we got 14 swifts in, and then the next year we got 26, you know, and then went down to 17, then it went up to 30 and 40. And so this year we're at 100 now. So, I mean, over 100, we took in over 100, we released over 80. You know, now it's becoming like, this is something important that we do, and we want more information about you know, about how it's all working out. Oh yeah, Josh, you have your hand raised again. Go ahead.
Oh no, sorry, that was more of the applause button. I was doing the reaction. I was excited about what you were describing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for coming in. You know, if you have any other questions about anything, you know, my email again is just my name at audubon.org. It's also, I can just put it in the chat right now, and we're on it's on our website.
I'm going to do a follow-up email tomorrow, and I'll put all the contact information in there.
Perfect.
And you mentioned early on a couple of birds that you thought had been poisoned with insecticides. Another problem, especially for raptors, is rodenticides.
Yes.
And our community program for November, on November 29th, will be with Christine Cummins from a place called Hope, talking about the problem of rodenticides and what we can do about it. So I hope everybody will come on to that program. Information will be forthcoming. And Sunny, thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
Great work you're doing, and I love the Swifts part especially.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Swifts are so cool.
They are. I mean, I could just, yeah, I won't start up again. I could talk about them forever. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone, and take care.
Bye. Thank you.